Hejsa, what are some of your sewing room essentials? I was tidying after a sewing session earlier, and I thought I would share a few of my favorite things in my sewing room. The first thing is, you probably got loads of these as well. Binder clips. I really love these. Not just for holding on binding, but they come in useful for so many different things. And then I have this magnetic dish for pins. This one is not sold as a dish for needles and pins. It's a thing for, I guess, people working in a garage or on a bicycle or something, to put in bolts and whatever else. So it's not as pretty as some of the magnetic needle dishes or needle pin cushions, whatever you want to call them, but I think it's probably a little bit cheaper because it wasn't aimed at a female craft, maybe. Anyway, I really like this, and I like that when you throw in the pins, they sort of sit along the edges, which makes it really easy to grab them, so that they're not all at the bottom. So I really like that. So just a tip, if you're looking for a magnetic dish for your pins and needles, maybe search for, I can't remember what I searched for. And speaking of magnets, I have this magnet on a clip by my sewing machine. I originally bought this for my sketchbook, but it came in a set of 4 or 5, and I don't really need that many for my sketchbook. But for my sketchbook, I use it to hold down pages when it's windy, and with the magnet I can put a small palette on right on the page, which makes it a lot easier. Anyway, that's not what I use it for at the sewing machine. As you can see, I've tied some string to it, and that is so that when I inevitably drop some pins on the floor, I can just swing down the magnet and pick them up that way, instead of trying to find them myself and bump my head on the table, which I've done a few times. So this is a really useful thing to have. And you can, obviously it doesn't have to be a magnet on a clip, that's just what I happen to have, but a magnet on a string for picking up pins, thumbs up for me. Another thing that I really like is having a seam ripper. I'm sure you got one as well, but what I really like about this one is that it's got a nice handle, and it's got this sort of rubber section here that means that it doesn't slip when I'm holding it or using it. So this is a really nice one from Clover, not sponsored. So I can definitely recommend this one. I like that it's a fairly big handle, so you can hold it properly. Because I find sometimes seam rippers, they have really tiny handles that are kind of awkward to hold, at least for a longer session, if you well and truly messed up your project. A little tip when you're using your rotary cutters is to tie some fabric to it. And I do the same thing for my fabric scissors, just so everyone in the household, well, that's just me and my husband, knows that those scissors and the rotary cutter, well, he doesn't use the rotary cutter. Those of us at fabric only. The reason why I have the fabric tied to this rotary cutter is that I've got one for paper as well, where I have put some washi tape on it so that I know which is which, because obviously it's the same type of cutter. The blades that I use in the paper rotary cutter, usually, unless I need something really sharp, are the used blades from the fabric one. I find that they can easily cut paper after they are not useful for the fabric anymore. So I just keep them in this little container. I think I got some. Yes, it's Alpha. I bought some blades at one point and they came in this. It's very handy for keeping the used ones. So if you need to use a rotary cutter for paper, try using the used ones from your fabric rotary cutter. You may find that they work just fine for that. I don't do a lot of clothes sewing. I find it a little bit too tricky. Maybe if I did it more, I would find it easier. But I do have something that I use when I do make the odd piece of garment. And that is a bunch of these washers. Again, I think they're for something to do with cars. I just searched for giant washers and I found these. So what they do is so let's imagine this is the paper pattern, and just put them down and they prevent the pattern from moving. And the same with the fabric, just pop them down and then you can cut it without it moving too much. I think you could probably cover these if you wanted to. Maybe just with some fabric, or maybe with a bit of wadding. Or maybe wadding and fabric. Which might actually make them less slippery on fabric, because fabric tends to grip itself. But I find they work just fine like this. Right, last thing I have is washi tape. Obviously you can use it for sticking things down with, but what I often use it for, both when I do some fabric collage or when I'm working on an embroidery pattern, is to pick up bits of fluff that's on the fabric. You can see I picked up a few bits there. This is really handy, especially when I'm doing embroidery. And for a similar purpose, I keep random bits of wadding that are not really good for anything, because they're also useful for picking up threads, so I don't have to do it by hand. I don't know if you can see that it's picked up a few bits. So yeah, those are my handy things in the studio. My seam ripper, the clips, the magnet, and washi tape, and repurposing my old rotary cutter blades, and now I'm gonna bring over the little dish with the needles. I was worried that everything else was gonna start to attach to it, but it's fine so far. So what are your can't live without things in your sewing room? I would love to know. Maybe you have some that I need to add to my sewing room. Thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, please give it a like. And maybe follow my channel so you don't miss the next video. Probably won't be about things in my sewing room, but you never know. So I hope you have a great day and happy sewing.